Imagine for a moment that you had access to the entire history of the world, past and future, right in the palm of your hand.
Mm.
That power, that irresistible pull of foreknowledge, is perhaps the ultimate dream. But the question is, has someone, somewhere, already achieved it?
It is the ultimate boundary. I mean, the idea of time travel is so transformative that if it were achieved, it would change every aspect of human life. And what's fascinating is that while we wait for, the scientists to break through the theoretical barriers, we as a culture have already identified and cataloged the alleged time travelers who have supposedly slipped into our timeline.
Exactly. And that is our mission today in the deep dive. We've been handed a truly comprehensive stack of sources outlining 3 of the most notorious, most controversial, and deeply viral alleged cases of time travel from the modern era. We are not interested in philosophical debates or ancient paradoxes today. We are diving deep into modern legends, born and amplified by the infrastructure of the internet.
Our deep dive is designed to be a complete shortcut for you. We are going to unpack these chronicles meticulously, moving chronologically and thematically. We start with John Titor, the anonymous internet prophet who provided shockingly detailed technical specifications for his machine.
Right.
Then, we move to Andrew Carlssin, the purported Wall Street wizard whose fortune was, well, statistically impossible. And finally, we will analyze the time-traveling hipster, a visual anomaly in a mysterious historical photograph.
And this exploration is about more than just detailing the claims and the eventual debunkings. It's about understanding the psychology of belief. Why do these narratives persist? How does the internet create and sustain modern folklore? And, what lessons do these hoaxes teach us about media literacy and confirmation bias? These 3 figures are cornerstones of online mystery and conspiracy culture. So let's unpack this dense material and see where the evidence truly stands.
Let's do it.
Let's begin with the one who truly defined the genre for digital age time travel hoaxes. John Titor. He established the standard for credibility through hyper-specific detail and apocalyptic dread.
He really did.
He is the original internet prophet of doom appearing right at the turn of the millennium.
Titor set a remarkably high bar for detail and narrative consistency, which is why his story endures. But the narrative begins in a slightly analog fashion, which is a great detail.
Oh, right.
The sources confirm his initial contact wasn't a public internet forum. His earliest communication was via faxed letters sent to the late-night paranormal radio host Art Bell in 1998.
Art Bell was the perfect conduit for this kind of high strangeness, but the legend really took off when he moved online. Let's unpack his core period of activity, which was, concentrated on internet bulletin boards from 2000 to 2001.
That's right. He spent those 2 years engaging directly with users, answering complex questions about physics, technology, and his life in the future. He presented himself as an official operative, an American soldier from the year 2036.
Which added this immediate structured credibility to his claims.
Exactly.
Now, we need to address his mission because it's the detail that made the story feel authentic, yet also kind of confusing. A time traveler from a war-torn future sent back to retrieve an IBM 5100 portable computer from 1975.
Right.
That sounds like a terrible risk for a piece of antique tech.
And that confusing yet specific purpose is exactly why it was so brilliant. Titor's detailed rationale was the secret sauce. He claimed this specific 1970s machine was required to debug legacy software in 2036.
Okay, so for the non-computer experts listening, we have to explain why the IBM 5100 was crucial enough to warrant a time jump.
We do.
Because on the surface, it just sounds like he needed a clunky old laptop.
It's far more obscure than that. Titor revealed a highly technical, obscure piece of information. The IBM 5100, uniquely for its time, possessed undocumented internal capabilities. It could emulate mainframes running both APL and basic programming languages.
Hey, wait. Why is that specific obscure functionality important, and how did Titor even know about it?
Because that knowledge was supposedly kept hidden by IBM. Titor's claim was that in his dark future of 2036, there was a massive Y2K-like bug looming in their legacy computer infrastructure. And the IBM 5100's unique ability to read and debug that specific legacy code was their only way out. He was sent to retrieve the machine, along with the original manuals, because he knew about this hidden hardware function.
So his technical insider knowledge about an obscure, undocumented feature of a niche 1970s computer was the smoking gun.
It was.
It wasn't about saving the world instantly. It was a complex technical supply run, a brilliant narrative choice that just screams insider knowledge.
Precisely. It elevated the hoax immediately past simple fantasy and into the realm of technical plausibility for many. But while the mission was technical, the virality, that came from the terrifying future he described. Titor was selling catastrophe, leveraging the anxieties of the post-9/11 world.
He didn't just warn of general doom. He gave definitive date-specific prophecies that truly gripped the early internet community.
He did. His core prophecy, the one that generated the most fear, was the sequence of future history. He claimed an American Civil War would begin in 2005, splitting the country along rural and urban lines.
And that conflict was merely a precursor, right? It was meant to be the spark that ignited global catastrophe a decade later.
Correct. He predicted that the escalating civil conflict would then lead to a global nuclear war in 2015. He was chillingly specific, claiming the conflict would involve Russia targeting major U.S. cities and resulting in the deaths of millions worldwide.
And providing a definitive date, 2015, gave the story an incredibly long shelf life. It was a ticking clock for over a decade.
A very long clock. And beyond the major wars, he threw in those highly specific cultural and technical details to weave an even more convincing tapestry of foreknowledge.
What were some of those?
Well, the source material highlights several claims. For instance, he warned about Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, what we know as mad-cow disease in beef.
Okay.
This warning gained immediate traction because it preceded the disease making major international headlines shortly thereafter.
So that was a big hit for him.
A huge one. He also claimed the 2004 Olympics would be the last one ever held, and provided the bizarre yet specific claim that the U.S. Capitol would ultimately move to Omaha, Nebraska.
It's those random small predictions mixed with the huge world-changing ones that really make you pause. But for the true believers, the core evidence was his description of the time machine itself.
Yes.
He didn't just claim time travel, he provided schematics.
This is where we need to slow down and really dissect the technical claims. Titor didn't just use random buzzwords. He cited established, though theoretical, physics concepts. He described his device as a stationary mass temporal displacement unit.
That sounds impressive. What did he claim powered this unit?
He claimed it was powered by two top-spin dual positive singularities. Now, for listeners who don't have a background in theoretical astrophysics, a singularity is typically associated with black holes, an infinitely dense point in space-time.
So he was basically saying his machine used two miniature black holes.
Exactly. He was claiming his machine generated a controlled, localized pair of these.
So he was claiming to generate micro black holes in the back of his Chevy. That's pushing the limits of credulity even for the early 2000s internet.
It is, but he backed it up with theoretical justification. He cited the concept of Tipler sinusoids. This was a critical concept, and we should explain it clearly.
Please do.
Tipler sinusoids refer to a speculative theoretical concept based on models by physicist Frank Tipler involving massive, infinitely long rotating cylinders. Theoretically, if you can rotate mass fast enough, it could warp space-time in a way that allows for travel backward in time, creating closed time-like curves.
I see. So Titor wasn't just inventing nonsense. He was taking real, albeit cutting-edge and, currently impossible, theoretical physics and claiming he made it practical.
That's it.
That's the definition of a great science fiction premise.
Exactly. It gave the appearance of scientific authority. He listed components like gravity sensors and cesium clocks, providing just enough verifiable components to make the fantastical elements seem grounded. He even provided visual evidence, posting scanned images of alleged schematics, manuals, and his supposed 2036 military unit insignia.
He was meticulous.
Incredibly meticulous in crafting this persona.
This level of detail meant that the story captivated early web communities almost immediately. By 2001, archiving websites popped up everywhere, dedicated to preserving every scrap of Titor's posts. The community became active participants in the unfolding myth.
And this propelled it into the mainstream. It moved beyond bulletin boards to be featured prominently on paranormal radio, including Art Bell's show, and then gained traction in newspapers and on television segments.
And the key question the media always played up was, is this an incredibly elaborate con or a time-hopping whistleblower trying to save humanity?
Right. And the mystery deepened significantly in 2003 when the story gained a physical manifestation. The John Titor Foundation published a book compiling his posts, John Titor, A Time Traveler's Tale.
That publication was a critical point in the hoax, wasn't it?
It really was. It suggested a legitimate organization was behind the mystery, giving the online content a tangible permanence and professionalism that helped sustain the legend far beyond the initial post window. It created the structural foundation for the conspiracy thread to flourish.
But time is, of course, the ultimate enemy of a time traveler who makes specific predictions.
Always.
As the two critical deadlines, 2005 for the Civil War and 2015 for the nuclear conflict passed, Titor's central claims should have completely fallen apart.
They absolutely did. All of Titor's verifiable high-stakes predictions failed catastrophically. The U.S. did not descend into civil war in 2005, and thankfully the world did not suffer a global nuclear exchange in 2015. His story had a clear expiration date, and it passed.
So, this is the crux of the problem for the believers. Why, even after 2015 passed without mushroom clouds, did the conspiracy theory not simply vanish? Why does Titor remain an icon?
Because Titor, the storyteller, was ingenious enough to provide his followers with an ultimate escape hatch. He preemptively defended against failed predictions by invoking the many-world theory of quantum physics.
Okay, let's explain that narrative defense mechanism in simple terms. What was he saying?
The many-worlds interpretation suggests that every possible quantum outcome creates a new, separate, parallel universe. Titor claimed that because time travel involves slightly altering your course through the continuum, our current timeline had diverged from his original timeline.
So essentially, Titor was saying, my warnings were true in my 2036, but because I traveled back, you successfully jumped onto an alternate timeline where the apocalypse was averted.
Precisely. It's a perfect out. If the prediction fails, the true believers can claim they were successful. They avoided the doom Titor warned about.
It's a self-sealing, unfalsifiable argument.
Completely. It requires no further evidence and can never be proven false because the truth exists in an untestable parallel dimension. That is the core reason the Titor legend persists today among diehards.
It's brilliant narrative design, but ultimately, the real-world investigation did catch up to the organization behind the myth.
It did. In 2009, long after Titor's online persona went silent, investigative work traced the John Titor Foundation P.O. Box to Florida. The evidence pointed strongly to the Haber brothers. Larry Haber was identified as the entertainment lawyer and CEO of the foundation.
And his brother was the missing technical piece of the puzzle.
Right. John Rick Haber was identified as a computer specialist.
So that pairing provided the clean, mundane explanation for the entire elaborate hoax.
It did. Laurie handled the legal structure, the book publication, and the professional appearance of the foundation. John Rick, the computer specialist, possessed the specific, obscure insider knowledge required to craft the story's smoking gun, the undocumented functions of the IBM 5100.
It's a classic case of the simple truth dismantling the complex fiction. But despite the Haber brothers being identified, the lack of a definitive on-camera confession means that small sliver of unresolved mystery keeps the fringe theories churning, right?
Oh, absolutely. The theories often focus on the idea that the brothers were just scapegoats, and that's its enduring cultural legacy. Titor is a massive icon of modern internet folklore. His saga established a template for all subsequent online mysteries. Detail, specificity, technical jargon, and a built-in escape clause.
And it's directly inspired major works of fiction, most famously the popular anime and video game series Steins Gate.
It has. Titor endures because his story perfectly fuses our love of science fiction with our fear of global catastrophe.
Okay, so if John Titor was the solemn, technically minded soldier sent to prevent an apocalypse, our next alleged time traveler, Andrew Carlssin, was, well, he was the greedy, self-interested financier.
A completely different motivation.
Right. Titor risked his life for a 1975 computer. Carlssin risked exposure for a massive payday.
The story of Andrew Carlssin is a completely different phenomenon. It's a case study not in technological mystery, but in spectacular media literacy failure. Unlike Titor, who carefully cultivated his narrative over years, Carlson's legend burst onto the scene suddenly on January 28, 2003.
And the red flag of all red flags is the source. The highly sensationalist tabloid Weekly World News.
Yeah.
This is the publication that routinely publishes articles about Batboy and, aliens visiting the White House.
It's a publication known almost entirely for satirical fiction, often bordering on performance art. But the claim was instantly captivating for anyone who dreamed of getting rich quick. Andrew Carlssin, a man supposedly 44 years old, was arrested by the FBI for insider trading.
And the scale of his financial success is what made the story instantly viral. The sources state he turned an initial investment of just $800.
Just $800.
Into an incredible $350 million in only 2 weeks.
And here is the core statistical impossibility that the story hung on. He allegedly made 126 consecutive profitable stock trades without a single loss.
Wow.
We aren't talking about slow, careful investing here. We're talking about high-risk, volatile trades 126 times in a row, all of them winners.
To put that into perspective for you, that is a feat that defies mathematical probability to such an extent that it could only be achieved if the trader knew the exact outcome of every single transaction before it occurred.
Exactly. It's a level of statistical improbability that immediately suggests foreknowledge. The narrative, therefore, didn't rely on technical jargon like Titor's. It relied entirely on the shock value of impossible financial success.
And according to the story, Carlssin confessed relatively quickly under pressure.
Supposedly, during a 4-hour interrogation session, he confessed to investigators that he was a time traveler from the year 2256. His motive was purely financial. He used knowledge of future stock market movements, gleaned from centuries of historical data, to execute his perfect trades.
Which led to this highly dramatic negotiation. This part is pure tabloid gold.
Oh, it is.
He tried to trade his future knowledge for his freedom.
His offer was spectacular. To secure leniency, the story claims he offered to reveal the precise hiding location of Osama bin Laden, who was still actively sought at the time, and, even more spectacularly, the cure for AIDS.
But he refused to reveal his timecraft's whereabouts or mechanics.
Right. He claimed the technology was too dangerous to share with the relatively primitive people of 2003.
The story wrapped up with a perfect mystery exit, guaranteeing its survival as a legend. He didn't stay locked up to face justice.
No. Carlssin was allegedly bailed out by a mysterious, unidentified benefactor who posted $1 million. Then, just as mysteriously, Carlssin vanished before his scheduled court hearing.
And the narrative concludes that investigators searched but found no records of his existence remaining. He just ceased to be part of the historical record.
Implying he had returned to his home time in 2256.
So here's the crucial question. How did a clearly satirical story about a guy who sounds like a caricature of financial greed manage to create a genuine international media frenzy?
This is the definitive media literacy failure of the early digital age. The mechanism of viral amplification was simple but devastating. In March 2003, Yahoo! News, a major, credible online portal at the time, picked up and republished the weekly world news story.
And they published it under a section titled Entertainment News and Gossip, but that nuance was completely lost in the subsequent wave of reposting.
Completely lost.
Yeah.
Precisely. International news outlets and everyday readers saw the Yahoo logo, which lent the story instant, unwarranted credibility. They missed the source context entirely.
So instead of seeing a joke from Weekly World News, they saw what appeared to be a genuine report about a real SEC arrest syndicated by a major U.S. news aggregator.
And the story spread globally, treated as factual news across dozens of countries, forcing real-world consequences like official responses from government agencies.
The SEC and the FBI were genuinely forced to respond to persistent media inquiries about the case.
They were. An official from the Securities and Exchange Commission famously debunks the story, stating it was pure fantasy and joking that it belonged in the same file as Elvis found on Mars.
That quote is iconic, and it should have killed the story instantly.
It should have.
But the rumor, having been legitimized by Yahoo, became faster than the retraction. Carlson's myth had found its feet.
And the debunking, thankfully, was simple and thorough. The core red flag was always the source. Weekly World News is known satire. Fact-checkers found zero official record of any SEC arrest, court case, or existence of an Andrew Carlssin in any public databases. He was entirely fabricated.
I think we need to point out the logical flaw that undermines the entire premise, even if we were to grant the time travel possibility. It's about the strategy he used.
The logic of his approach is fundamentally flawed for anyone trying to operate covertly. If you're a time traveler trying to exploit the markets while remaining hidden, making 126 consecutive winning trades is the worst possible strategy.
It is maximally conspicuous.
The most conspicuous.
A real insider trader tries to minimize suspicion, conduct trades slowly, and use complex financial instruments to mask their gains. Carlson's method was the equivalent of walking into the SEC headquarters and screaming, "I'm a time traveler."
It's true. The only reason Carlson's trades were 126 consecutive winners was because the story needed that level of spectacle to justify the time travel claim. His conspicuousness was necessary for the narrative, but nonsensical for the purported mission.
Yet Carlsson remains a vibrant part of the lexicon. He's the folk hero of the financial time travel dream.
He taps directly into that universal fantasy. The ability to achieve pure financial gain, instantly and impossibly, with zero effort. The appeal is immense. Everyone jokes about going back in time to buy specific stocks. Carlssin is the fictional personification of that dream.
And just like Titor, Carlssin has a conspiracy angle that sustains the myth despite the factual debunking.
The fringe theory here is particularly clever. Speculation suggests that Carlssin was a real-time traveler whose identity was deliberately covered up by government authorities. The theory posits that the government planted the story in the known satirical tabloid, The Weekly World News, as the perfect form of deflection.
You hide the truth in plain sight by labeling it as absolute fiction.
Exactly.
So if you mention Carlssin, you are dismissed as believing in Bat Boy, regardless of whether the initial event was true or not.
It's the ultimate deflection strategy, disguising genuine news as an intentional joke to ensure automatic credulity failure for anyone who repeats it. The Carlssin case is a textbook example of how fake news, when stripped of its source context, can proliferate globally and become a powerful urban legend, teaching us a harsh lesson about digital age credulity.
Okay, so we've analyzed the prophet who spoke in detail, that's Titor, and the financier who traded impossibly, Carlssin. Our third case is entirely different.
Completely different.
It's unique because it wasn't a claim made by an individual. It is a crowdsourced mystery born from a single static historical photograph, the time-traveling hipster.
This is a visually powerful legend because it relies purely on interpretation and perceived anachronism. The sources confirm this is an authentic historical photograph taken in October 1941 during the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia, Canada.
And the image existed quietly in an archive for nearly 70 years. When did the mystery begin to unfold?
Around 2010, the photo was uploaded as part of an online exhibit by the Brawlorn Pioneer Museum. When internet users began browsing the historical collection, they noticed one figure who stood out drastically from the surrounding 1940s crowd.
Right. Everyone else in the picture conforms perfectly to our mental image of 1941 fashion, men in suits, formal hats, and generally heavy, dark clothing. But this one young man looks like he stepped out of a coffee shop in the year 2000.
Exactly. He was quickly dubbed the time-traveling hipster because of his distinctly casual, seemingly modern appearance. His entire look contrasted sharply with the formality of the surrounding spectators, leading people to immediately jump to the most extraordinary conclusion that he had slipped through time.
Okay, let's break down the specific alleged visual evidence. What were the exact anachronisms that convinced millions of people he was from the future? We should really tackle this forensically.
Okay. There were three critical points of visual discord. First, his fashion. He wore what looked like a knitted sweater or cardigan with a prominent graphic emblem or logo across the chest. To modernize, this resembled a contemporary logo t-shirt.
Okay.
Coupled with his long, unslicked, messy hair and the fact he wasn't wearing a hat, his attire was deemed far too casual, even rebellious, for a public gathering in 1941.
Second, the eyewear. Those were often cited as the most damning evidence.
The sunglasses, yes. He sported sleek, wraparound, or bug-eyed sunglasses. People argued that this style of close-fitting, aerodynamic eyewear was absolutely futuristic for the early 1940s, when spectacles were generally round, simple, or, in the case of protective gear, large and boxy.
And the third piece of evidence was the technology he was holding the camera.
The technology. At chest level, he was holding a small, portable camera. Because of the photo's lower resolution and the angle, internet commentators immediately mistook its compact size for a modern digital point-and-shoot camera, or, in some of the wildest theories, even an early cell phone.
Right.
It simply didn't look like the large box cameras the public associated with the era.
The critical point here, and what sustained the initial belief, is that the sources confirmed the photograph itself was absolutely genuine and unaltered.
It was.
It wasn't a Photoshop prank. The man really is standing there looking like that in a 1941 photo. That authenticity is what gave the wild theories their initial powerful boost.
That authenticity is the engine of the mystery. The image went global almost instantly after being posted on sites like dig.com with the headline, "Time Traveler Caught on Camera in 1941."
It was a fascinating moment of digital archaeology turning into global pop culture. Major international media outlets, from Fox News in the US to news organizations across Europe and Asia, covered the story, which drove massive, unprecedented traffic to the small Brawlorn Pioneer Museum's website.
The public reaction was a beautiful mix of serious speculation and pure creative humor. People crafted elaborate backstories, imagining what kind of mission the hipster was on, often resulting in highly entertaining memes.
The image was simply too good not to share and speculate about.
It really was. But the narrative only holds up until you apply historical context. Experts and historians eventually stepped in, performing a forensic debunking, tackling each anachronism one by one.
That's the key, applying context instead of modern assumption. Let's start with the supposedly futuristic wraparound sunglasses.
Okay.
They weren't futuristic at all, were they? We simply forgot about their existence in that era.
Absolutely. Historians noted that similar sporty or protective sunglasses and goggles with side shields were available in the 1920s and 1930s. They weren't street fashion, but they were common for specialized activities. Pilots, mountaineers, skiers, and industrial workers.
Ah, okay.
They were specifically designed to minimize glare and peripheral light. For a crowd attending an outdoor event in sunny British Columbia, it's not outlandish for a young, slightly rebellious man to be wearing this style of protective eyewear.
That makes perfect sense. We tend to assume 1940s eyewear was exclusively those tiny circular frames or big boxy goggles, forgetting the diversity of practical design. Now, what about the logo t-shirt that looked so modern?
That was a perfect example of confirmation bias, viewing a historical artifact through a modern lens and misinterpreting the details in a low-resolution black and white image.
Right.
Upon closer inspection, experts concluded it was not a printed t-shirt logo, but far more likely a knitted sweater or cardigan with a sewn-on emblem or large letter.
Like a Letterman sweater or a sports jersey?
Exactly. The sources specifically noted that the pattern and style strongly resembled the kind of sports merchandise or team jerseys, such as those worn by the Montreal Maroons hockey team of that era.
So, casual athletic wear.
It was certainly not the norm for a bridge reopening, but for a young man, it wasn't impossible or outside the bounds of 1940s fashion. He was simply underdressed and likely engaged in a bit of youthful fashion rebellion.
Which brings us to the camera that looked like a sleek digital point-and-shoot.
Camera enthusiasts provided the final piece of the puzzle. They identified the device as likely an analog camera that was, in fact, compact for the time. Specifically, it could be a folding pocket camera, or models like the Kodak Brownie, which were widely available by the late 1930s.
So what appears sleek and modern in a low-resolution photo is just a small folding analog camera being held casually at chest height. So the ultimate conclusion is that the man was neither a temporal tourist nor a fashion revolutionary. He was just a young Canadian man who owned a pair of sporty sunglasses, an athletic sweater, and a compact camera. Our assumptions were simply too narrow.
The debunking was powerful because it systematically removed the necessity for the extraordinary explanation. It taught us that the people of the 1940s had far more diverse fashion and available technology than the stylized, homogeneous image we often carry in our minds today, which is generally derived from formal photography and Hollywood films.
I have to admit, those sunglasses really got me. It's funny how quickly we forget that people in the 40s wore anything remotely athletic or sporty. It truly is a study in confirmation bias, isn't it?
It is the ultimate lesson. We look at the past through the filter of our present knowledge, and when something doesn't conform to the stylized historical costume we expect, we immediately leap to the most incredible explanation. The mundane, historically accurate context is often ignored in favor of the amazing narrative.
Yet, despite being thoroughly solved, the image endures. It's a powerful meme and remains a key touchstone in debates about time travel proof.
It does, because it's highly engaging and visual. The museum inadvertently launched one of the biggest viral myths of the decade. The term time-traveling hipster itself has entered the lexicon, and the image continues to invite people to play detective, demonstrating the power of visual evidence, even misleading visual evidence, to captivate the collective imagination.
So we've taken a truly deep dive into three titans of modern viral legend, examining not only their claims, but also the psychological reasons they continue to persist. We started with John Titor, the highly detailed prophet who warned of a 2015 nuclear war, whose story was so clever it had a built-in defense against failure.
Then we moved to Andrew Carlssin, the greedy financier who made statistically impossible stock trades, whose existence was a short-lived joke in a satirical tabloid that became a global news failure when source context was lost. And finally, the time-traveling hipster, the visual oddity whose alleged anachronisms were systematically explained by a better, more nuanced understanding of 1940s fashion and technology history.
These stories persist not as verifiable history, but as sophisticated pieces of modern folklore. Titor satisfies our fear of future catastrophe and our desire for complex technical proof. Carlssin highlights the timeless fantasy of using future knowledge for wealth and simultaneously acts as a cautionary tale about checking the source.
And the hipster demonstrates how easily confirmation bias can trick the eye, forcing us to leap to extraordinary conclusions when a perfectly mundane, historically sound explanation is available. These cases highlight the power of the internet to not just transmit information, but to actively build and reinforce global mythologies.
The so what for you, the learner, is profoundly relevant. These cases teach us crucial lessons about filtering the information we consume today. The most compelling narrative is rarely the most truthful one, and the most elaborate hoaxes, like Titor's many worlds theory, often have structural defenses designed specifically to ensure they can never be definitively eradicated from the collective consciousness.
They endure because they are engaging. They highlight our relentless fascination with future knowledge, our deep-seated fears, and the immense power of compelling online narratives that deliberately blur the line between entertainment and belief.
Great.
The John Titor saga, in particular, demonstrated how an anonymous narrative can evolve into a collective global puzzle that people contribute to and dissect for decades, cementing his status as a cult icon even after the hoax was revealed.
And Carlson's story is a constant reminder that we must scrutinize the source of spectacular claims, regardless of who aggregates or republishes the material. It took only one source mistake for a joke to become a global inquiry.
And the hipster, being so visual, reminds us to question our assumptions about the past. History is always far stranger, more diverse, and less stylized than the neat, contained version we often carry in our heads. We must always analyze historical artifacts using the context of their time, not ours.
So, in a world saturated with information, where anyone can post a blueprint or a picture, these viral legends remind us that sometimes the most enduring mysteries are those we create ourselves. And that leads to a final question. If true, successful time travel ever occurred, how could we possibly distinguish it from the most elaborate, well-funded hoax?
Because if the time traveler decided to be quiet and discreet, we'd never notice them. But if they decided to be loud and dramatic, either to warn us, like Titor, or to get rich, like Carlssin, they would immediately be met with the same skepticism and media frenzy. The evidence of true time travel might simply be lost in the noise of the viral sensation it creates.
A truly provocative thought to end on. If you enjoyed this deep exploration of these sensational and highly detailed chronicles, you are going to want to stick around. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Deep Dive podcast for more detailed explorations and stories just like these. We'll see you next time.